represents the end of the first major southbound peninsula on the East Coast. So as we look north, we're looking northeast, and birds are pushed over to the coast with northwest winds. Hold on, I'm going to flip you around. So that northerly component encourages birds to migrate south in the fall, right? Every bird could use a friendly tailwind. That westerly component is what we need to push birds over to the coast. So as birds range well into the Canadian Arctic, right? So if they are continuously being hit with northwest winds, birds are inevitably going to pile up on the coast, and especially juvenile birds, but we'll get into that later. So as birds reach the coast, they can go no further east, and they often follow the coast. So from Canada down to us, birds are piling up on the coast. And then if we get a nice push of northwest winds, we get two sources for our migration, right? We get the coastal birds continuing south, and then we get a new flush of birds from the west. So as they're coming down, they see the Delaware Bay to the east, or to the west, and then they see the Atlantic to the east. And most of the birds that we're dealing with here are strict land birds, especially our larger birds, our beautios, like the red-tailed hawk, the broad-winged hawk, the red-shouldered hawk, turkey vulture. These are birds that want nothing to do with water because they rely so heavily on thermals. So a little fact about thermals. We've probably all heard that term. A thermal is just a pocket of hot air that's rising off of the earth. So parking lots, open fields, areas that get uninhibited sun become these patches of concentrated heat. And as we all know from cooking pasta, etc., heat rises, right? So birds like broad-winged hawks use those huge wings to circle up and up and up, riding those thermals like an elevator. And then in ideal circumstances, they can soar south and find another one. In the case of Cape May, they have the Delaware Bay standing in their way. So from Cape May Point, the nearest crossing to the south is Cape Henlopen, which is 12.2 miles away. 12.2 miles over open water is a daunting thing because any heat that would have been reflected by the land is being absorbed by the Delaware Bay. So there's no thermals. As soon as you're out of the Delaware Bay, you're on your own power. So those large birds and some of our small ones often turn around and go back to the northeast. Here's our lighthouse. So those birds will often circle around, kind of going through the thought process, deciding whether the conditions are good enough to go or not. And more often than not, they decide to go back to the northeast or northwest along the bay shore in search of a shorter crossing, which unfortunately for them is quite far. So Cape May hooks back in towards the southwest and pinches the mouth of the Delaware Bay to 12.2 miles across from Henlopen, and the bay opens up in kind of a gourd shape with the stem reaching up towards Philadelphia. So it is kind of a long backtrack for them, which is a tough choice. So we do have certain species that opt to cross. These are our strong flyers, especially birds that are using mostly powered flight anyway. So powered flight is the alternative to using thermals or soaring/gliding. So powered flight is most evident in our falcons. So American kestrel, merlin, and peregrine falcon. These guys, they have long, slender, pointed wings. They can use thermals, but they're not the most efficient at using those thermals. They often are seen booking it, right? Flapping all the way through. So peregrine falcon, strongest flyer in North America, arguably. And then merlin, also an exceptional flyer. They will often take off over open water, straight that way, and just muscle their way through. Other species that will do this, northern harrier, kind of a surprising one because of their slow flapping and their kind of lazy, graceful flight. They are actually extremely strong flyers. Bald eagle, another very strong flyer, and a surprising one given the size of the bird, but they are adept at powered flight. And then osprey. Osprey, if you look at whenever I'm talking about identification of an osprey, I always discuss the adaptations that have carried over from the marine environment. So these are birds that are highly adapted to life on the ocean, life in high wind, like dealing with water at all times. So they are perfectly comfortable over the Delaware Bay. And some of those adaptations I'm talking about for high wind and water are wings that sweep forward and then come back, and they're relatively narrow and tapered. So that description would fit any of our gulls, right? If you picture a laughing gull or a great black-backed gull, long and slender wings that come forward and then taper back. And one of the things that I always point out, and I'm gonna try to get a wide angle here for you, so wing posture, and I'll go through all three. So we'll start with the osprey. The osprey have an arched wing. They dip like that at the end. Bald eagle, stick straight. And then turkey vulture has a dihedral. If you've ever heard V for vulture, that's where the dihedral comes in. So that's posture. And if you get a head-on view of a gull, you'll notice that they also have those arched wings. So I got a little carried away there, but we'll keep orienting you. The dunes are one of the most exciting places to be in Cape May. The dunes represent both a feeding opportunity. We have some monarchs going by. It's a big monarch day. We had huge roosts last night. Oh, and speaking of which, here comes a kestrel now. I don't know if you can see it. Hold on, right over that sign. Oh, I don't know if you could see that. I took you away just before we hit the sun. So I did my best, so that was a perfect point. We have all these insects. Here's looks like a blue dasher dragonfly. All these insects are utilizing the dune. So merlin, kestrel, small birds of prey, they will also utilize the dune. We often see American kestrels and merlins buzzing the dune and coming up with dragonflies. This is an all too common sound here in Cape May Point State Park. But anyway, these birds that have powered flight, they can afford to stick to the dunes and take a coastal migration. There's 3 more monarchs going by my scope because they rely on powered flight. So coastal sites, and I'm sorry I'm being fairly long-winded, coastal sites often have more falcons and accipiters. So the accipiters, that's our sharp-shinned and Cooper's hawks. The reason that our coastal sites have those birds in higher numbers than bald eagles and our buteos is because they rely on powered flight. Broad-winged hawk, red-shouldered hawk, bald eagle, these are often the main event for inland hawk watching sites like Hawk Mountain and Hawk Ridge and Montclair in New Jersey. So the reason for that is that the ridges, while offering thermals, also offer a kind of avenue for the wind. If you get the wind comes in and bounces off from the valley, off of the walls of the mountain, and can add that extra little lift that can funnel birds through. So when thinking about evolution and thinking about behavior, some of the things you want to always factor in are how to save energy. So as we watch these monarchs, I'm not sure if you can see them, but there are two soaring monarchs there in the middle of the screen. Monarchs, another key migrant in Cape May, are actually a soaring species of butterfly. They're one of our largest butterflies, and they use those broad wings to catch thermals the same way that our raptors do. So these dunes are an incredibly dynamic place, amazing for falcons and accipiters on days with high wind. And I know this is about hawks, but I have to highlight this plant right here, which we can credit for a lot of our monarch densities. This is seaside goldenrod. Seaside goldenrod is a prolific flower producer and just attracts all manner of insects, but is extremely important for the monarchs, and they are just streaming by nonstop right now. So getting back to the hawks and Cape May, we talked about geography, we talked about wind, we've talked a little bit about adaptations. Let's head over to the Hawkwatch itself and get you oriented for where we work and where we talk to all manner of people. The Hawkwatch averages over 30,000 raptors a year. That is unfortunately a 20,000 bird reduction roughly from the historic averages. And the Hawkwatch sees roughly the same number of visitors, which is my primary job on the Hawkwatch. As an interpretive naturalist, my job is to explain the ecology of the place, point out birds to people, make sure they're having a good time and they are leaving with a positive impression of Cape May and of wildlife. We've got some nice songbirds in the dunes here. We've had a few days of northwest winds, which have brought just incredible numbers of yellow-rumped warblers, American kestrels, sharp-shinned hawks, monarchs. Just last week, we had a single day with over 4,000 raptors, which was made up of nearly 2,000 sharp-shinned hawks and nearly 1,200 American kestrels. So now we're getting our first view of the platform itself. I'm gonna switch you around here. This is our Hawkwatch. We have our official hawk counter there and turquoise up at the top right. The Cape May Point State Park was kind enough to make this handicapped accessible. Birding for all is extremely important for us. So as we get on, we'll notice a variety of habitats, and we'll see Bunker Pond. We'll see a marsh on the left. We'll see, hi, yeah, thank you. Some of our lovely visitors. Okay, so we've made it up to the top deck. I'm gonna put down my scope real quick. So I saw a comment about closed captioning, and I'm not sure how to fix that. Is that something that I can do on my end?
Yeah, I was looking into that, and I'm not sure if there's a way to do that from here, but I'm looking to see if I can find an option for it.
Okay. Let me see. No, unfortunately, I am not seeing any options for closed captioning. But in the meantime, this is recorded, so we could potentially add them on later, right?
This is being recorded, so we can add closed captioning on at the end.
Got it. So we just had a sharp-shinned hawk zoom through here. So here's our platform. I'll bring you through some of the main landmarks. There's the bunker over there, which we saw from the beach, the pier, water tower. I'm sure all of you have beloved and troublesome landmarks at your local Hawkwatches. The two white sticks in the middle of the pond, we call this the drop off. Here's the cherries, the cedars, and the pavilion roof, and of course, the lighthouse. So to get people oriented, this is north. And as many of our birds take this coastal route, they will come from the east or northeast, down the coast and to us in this direction. Others, mainly our Uteos and eagles, will come straight north. And it really depends on the day. We've got another sharp-shinned hawk up there, it looks like. So yeah, we've talked, or Eric introduced the idea of community-led conservation, and that is, in my opinion, one of the best things about Cape May. So whenever I'm talking to people about community conservation in Cape May, I always mention a kind of positive feedback loop that we experience in Cape May. Obviously, migration has been a phenomenon in Cape May for millennia, and it took a while, but the character of our relationship with these animals has transitioned to a fully positive one, from a kind of neutral to exploitative to a now collaborative and positive relationship, largely from an economic standpoint and from the spiritual and educational standpoint as well. So that positive feedback loop I'm talking about can be best exemplified by wildlife gardens and by protected land. So places like this, the Cape May Point State Park, and then we have the Higbee Beach National Wildlife Refuge, Coxhall Creek Wildlife Management Area, the famous South Cape May Meadows Nature Conservancy property. All of these, as well as the countless volunteer associate naturalists and volunteer monarch naturalists, are a testament to the ability of wildlife to enter and touch people's lives. So the positive feedback loop I'm talking about is specifically with the creation of habitat. So the phenomenon of migration that's been going on for forever. Whoa, that was a very strange dragonfly. Anyway, it was a darner of some sort with a bright red abdomen. I'll look into the guide later. But in the preservation of habitat, the restoration of habitat, and the creation of gardens on private land, we both honor the migration spectacle and we give wildlife an opportunity to come here. So thanks, Mike. That was what I was thinking as well. Maybe a comet darner. That would be a lifer for me. Cool. So between habitat creation and outreach and science, we just have a ton of opportunities to interface with this wildlife and give them as good a chance as we can for them to complete their migration successfully. Right now, it looks like we have a sharp-shinned hawk crossing the pond, a monarch going right in front, another sharp-shinned hawk off to the north. So let's talk a little bit about ID a little further. So I've mentioned a few key adaptations of the osprey and the falcons, but I'm going to get into some of our more common birds, starting with the sharp-shinned hawk, because we just saw a few of them. The sharp-shinned hawk are the smaller representative of our two common accipiters, so accipiter. So accipiters, these are our forest hawks. So they are classified by their long tail and relatively short and broad wings. So thinking from an evolutionary standpoint, what could those be used for? And the answer is maneuverability in the forest. So yeah, I can try. The zoom is not amazing on my phone, so I'll just show you the scenery. It's a much better view than my face. So here's Bunker Pond again. And what I was saying, sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks, the accipiters are our forest hawks. So they have long tails for steering through tight spaces. And then, thank you, Eugenia. And short, broad wings that can be easily tucked and manipulated to get through tight spaces in pursuit of mainly small birds. So using those characteristics, we can whittle it down to two species, sharp-shinned and Cooper's hawks. Between the two, identifying between the two can be very tricky and is kind of a lifelong identification project. That's what I tell everybody, and I always love it when people walk away from my workshops with the understanding that it's okay to be wrong and it's okay to just put accipiter species if they're keeping a checklist. There's often a lot of pressure to make a call, and I think that's backwards. Anyway, getting into the IDs themselves, we love to use what are termed macro field marks by Cape May legend Michael O'Brien. So often when we're parsing through songbird identification, we're looking at tiny marks like, does it have a ring around the eye? How broad is the ring around the eye? Does it have wing bars? Is it a strong wing bar or a faint wing bar? How far down the belly does the streaking go, etc.? So those are micro field marks. Macro field marks are much more relevant in hawk watching because we're so often seeing birds from a distance. So general impression, size, shape, and behavior, I think, are the most important. And I would even go as far to say that size can often be thrown out. Size, especially with accipiters, I think is more often than not misleading unless you have a direct reference. So with Cooper's hawk and sharp-shinned hawk, the things that I mainly look for are the character and the frequency of how they're flapping. And this is all very like technical and nitpicky, but I think that these things are often kind of defining to the character of a species if you want to really get to know them in the field. These things beyond technical jargon definitely add to the feel of a species if you want to become familiar with them. So sharp-shinned hawks, if you've ever been out in the field, I'm sure you've heard somebody say that sharp-shinned hawks have snappy wing beats. And what that is referring to is the double action. And I'm going to take you away from Bunker for a second. So sharp-shinned hawks have a crook in the wing here at the shoulder, and they start with the shoulder and end with the wrist. So that second action is what people are referring to when they say snap, right? So Cooper's hawks are a much longer winged and stiffer winged bird. So they flap straight from the shoulder. And there is some variation on this if you have high wind or if the bird is hunting. But as a general rule, Cooper's hawks keep their wings much more stiff. Otherwise, when I mentioned the frequency, a larger bird can soar much longer. They have to flap less, and it's kind of in their best interest to flap less because it takes a lot of energy to flap. Remember, we were talking about thermals and updrafts. So sharp-shinned hawks, generally more spunky. They do much tighter circles when they're soaring. They flap more wildly. Cooper's hawk, steadier in flight with more even weight distribution throughout the body. I think of sharp-shinned hawk as kind of a canoe shape, or Cooper's hawk is kind of a canoe-shaped body, where sharp-shinned hawk is like if you cut a teardrop in half lengthwise. We're looking right now. It's way out there. I wish you could see it. There's a male northern harrier, colloquially known as a gray ghost. So I mentioned when I was talking about strong flyers that can cross the bay, northern harriers have these kind of slow, graceful wing beats. I really hope you can see these guys coming in. I know you can, but that kind of slow, graceful, buoyant flight lends itself to a kind of ghostly feel, and the male harrier happens to be extremely pale underneath with a broad black hand. So it's just a great name for the bird. There's a second one coming through. This one appears to be a juvenile. So these birds actually look like they're taking off over the bay. So for some better orientation, like I said, this is north. And then if we do a full 180, we see Bunker Pond, see all our beloved landmarks, and then straight to the south, open water. And Cape Henlopen is roughly that way. So these birds are taking off to the south because they can handle it, especially on a day like today with relatively light wind. So we got into the weeds a little bit on identification. And what I really hope to take away from this is that when you go out to these places and you just sit, this was extremely hard for me as a young birder. I was always flabbergasted by the idea of waiting around when I could otherwise search for birds, which sounded like much more fun. But if you just sit and wait, the amount of observation, like quality observation you can do is really amazing if you just give a place its due time. I think that's been done ad nauseum in Cape May, which is amazing. So anyway, I think I'll end on that note and I'll pass it back to Eric. I hope that was okay.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Will. I think we all learned a lot about hawk migration and hawk ID and what a hawk watch station kind of looks like. Before we move on, I would just like to open up to the floor to see if anybody has any questions for Will or comments or just anything y'all want to know. Feel free to unmute yourself and chime in.
Well, if nobody has any questions, I will just encourage people to come out. The Cape May Hawkwatch is open until Halloween, so just for the next 11 days, which is very sad for me. There will be a naturalist here on the Hawkwatch, at least one naturalist from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., 7 days a week. I'm one of those people, and then I have two lovely colleagues who also work with me as interpretive naturalists. Oh, a northern pintail just flew in. So myself and my two other naturalists will be here, and we're more than happy to talk to you, answer your questions, point out birds, talk about Cape May, anything you'd like. So if any of you are ever in the area, feel free to come by.
And for those of us who aren't avid birders, would you like to explain to the group what a northern pintail is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as we get into the latter end of October, waterfowl migration is going to ramp up, and northern pintail is one of our many species of dabbling duck. It's a long, elegant bird, and all dabbling means is they sit underwater to pick at plants and such, rather than dive under in search of fish or other arthropods or arthropods.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
So short answer, it's a nice duck.
It is a very nice duck. Yeah, and if y'all have any other questions that pop into your mind, I think you are sticking around for the rest of the presentation, Will. And if not, then we can go ahead and forward you questions. But yeah, thank you so much for the presentation.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for having me. I'm glad y'all enjoyed.
All right, great. So I think with that, now that we have seen what a hawkwatch kind of looks like at one of the bigger hawkwatches in the country, I think we can get a little bit more of an introduction to Fairwood Forest and what is possible at Fairwood Forest. And we have a few people here with us today who know firsthand what hawkwatching is like at Fairwood Forest. So I'm going to go ahead and share a short video with you all. And then we're going to have Mike give a little introduction to Fairwood. and hawk watching at Fairwood. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. And if y'all aren't seeing or hearing anything, just go ahead and speak up and I will make sure that I fix that. So here is a little introduction to Fairwood and hawk watching at Fairwood.
Hi everyone, I'm Daisy. I'm the site manager here at Fairwood Forest, and this place is very dear to my heart. As a Maryland Master Naturalist, I know how important nature is to our health, to our well-being, and this place was in dire need of being taken care of, possibly being torn down for development, and I knew we had to save the trees.
So we worked with Brandon Scott, who is now our mayor and was our councilman, to save the forest over about an 8-year period.
So beautiful to look at, and its beauty is self-evident. I think it brings peace and wildlife to this, urban community, which is very special.
It's just an amazing spot in the middle of a city, and I think we're very lucky to have it. 4 acres, and it will never be developed.
Ever since I moved here, me and my husband, we would take care of the forest and maintain the trail so people could enjoy it, walk their dogs, walk their children, have a good place. So it's very dear to me because it's very special. It has a lot of wonderful nature inside with our animals, our amazing trees, all the wonderful wildflowers. And every day we're finding something new about our forest.
It turns out that we have in this forest over 20 mature trees of different varieties, many examples of them, as well as a multitude of birds, mainly hawks, that migrate.
Fairwood Forest is one of the flyway zones of migration for many raptors, mostly hawks. We have an amazing birder here in Maryland, and he has lived in this neighborhood and has tracked the many hawks that have migrated through. On some current days, he will count thousands that are flying over. So he's the one that brought it to our attention that this is part of the flyway, and it brought more birders out to come experience it, and it's pretty fun.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike Hudson. I work for Birds of Urban Baltimore, and today I'm here at Fairwood Forest doing some hawk watching. So I know you guys have already talked a little bit about hawks and hawk watching, got a chance to see how it's done at one of the bigger bird observatories in the region. But you don't necessarily need a great migration choke point like Cape May to have a great time hawk watching. There's lots of great places all around. You can see here in Fairwood Forest, we've just got a nice view of the sky. We're on a little bit of a ridge. And that, within the city, of course, we're not up on a mountain, but we got a little bit of height here. We're a little above the surrounding city. And that's really all you need. This spot is great because it's a nice little green corridor in the middle of a relatively developed part of the city. So raptors that are coming over may swoop through and grab up prey. This may be one of the easier places to hunt. There's raptors that are local that nest in the area. And of course, there's plenty of things that go overhead here. We've already this morning, in a relatively short period of time, had several red-tailed hawks, a sharp-shinned hawk. And that's what I really love about birding in urban areas, and especially about hawk watching. Another flyby, a little warblery guy just went by. That's the other fun thing about hawk watching. You don't just see hawks, we got all sorts of other things. We've had some chimney swift migrants, some blue jay migrants. That's, like I was saying, that's one of my favorite things about birding and any kind of birding in an urban area, is that it's a different setting than maybe you think about. It's a different, your surroundings are not gonna look the same, but you got all the same species, you've got a lot of the same excitement to be had. And this forest is great for it. This is such an accessible forest. It's got such a nice variety of habitats through it. And it's got this nice, great sky view for hawk watching.
This amazing forest is the reason we are here today. While the events we're hosting this week are virtual, we invite you to come out to the forest and have your own adventure. Enjoy your own personal hawk watch or explore the trails and complete the self-guided scavenger hunt that will teach you all about the raptors of Maryland. Keep an eye out for events in Forest Care Days, and on behalf of Baltimore Green Space, the Friends of Fairwood Forest, and the Hamilton Community Association, we hope you enjoy the presenters today, and we hope to see you in the forest soon. All right, great. Well, that is our little introduction to Fairwood Forest, and I think I will pass it over to Mike just to let us know a little bit more about Fairwood Forest and opportunities to just enjoy the space there and why it's a special space. So if you want to go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone again. I'm the same Mike Hudson from the video. I work for Birds of Urban Baltimore. That is my day job. And so I'm lucky that I get to be outside doing fun nature and bird related stuff all the time. One of those cool things is doing events like this and getting to explore parks and green spaces that are smaller, not as heavily trafficked. And Fairwood Forest is a really cool one because I really love how Will talked about some of the geography and the way the geography and the wind pattern play in, because there are aspects of that that occur around Baltimore that make places like Fairwood Forest good for hawk watching locally. What he was describing when he was talking about what happens with migration away from the coast, where you have the ridge lines and the hill lines, creating conditions that allow for updrafts and thermals consistently, even on cool and cloudy days when normally large birds like redtails might not normally be able to get their thermals to get up and get moving. In these areas where you have ridge lines and hills running, you get enough wind happening that they can keep moving anyway. And that's basically what happens at Fairwood Forest. Like I mentioned in the video, it's not on the top of a mountain, but it is on a rise. That part of the city where Fairwood Forest is located is where the hills, the Piedmont, the hills that sort of form the foothills of the Appalachians, really start to get going. You really start to see some of those low rolling rises. And so you get the kind of wind conditions that create consistent, productive use of that space by hawks. Then again, like I was saying in the video, so that provides the reason why we get these biggish flights pushing overhead, why you get this nice overhead migrant of hundreds and hundreds of raptors going by. As I mentioned in the video as well, we also know that for a lot of raptors, as they're migrating, it's important that they have places to stop and grab food. Some raptors feed as they're migrating. I've been hawk watching before and seen birds dive out of active migration into wooded areas, grab food, and then rise up and keep migrating. So we know that the habitat that birds are going over is important to them as well. And that's another reason why Fairwood Forest is a significant and pretty special place, because as you're coming over a developed urban area like Baltimore, the number of nice open green spaces that are going to provide places for birds to hunt as they're going, or roost overnight if they're winding down the migration or conditions are no longer as good and they need to find a place to roost and sleep. You need these kinds of nice open green spaces to provide that. And Fairwood does that. It's in a very developed part of the city, but it's a nice long stretch of wooded habitat, a very healthy wooded habitat. So it's important not only in that the geography allows for hawk migration to be consistent in that area, but also in that the resources in the habitat below, the parkland that's available, provides important roosting and feeding opportunities. We also know, and this is kind of cool fact, that it's important for raptors and birds of prey that we might not see an active migration lot. Roosting owls are found there, including some species of owls that are primarily migratory in our region. So even for species that we can't just look up in the sky and observe them going over, we know that it still plays a very important role in the migration of many of these birds in our area. And I'm happy to take questions or for Eric to prompt me to say other things as well.
All right, yeah, no, that was great, Mike. Thank you for the introduction about why Fairwood is a special place. And I also see in the chat that Kevin, who is a local birder in the region who does a lot of hawk watches in Fairwood, didn't say that he went out on a hawk watch this past Monday and he had a pretty decent count and one very notable bird. He had over 41 turkey vultures, 9 sharp-shinned hawk, 1 Cooper hawk, 2 red-tailed hawk, and a golden eagle that flew over Fairwood just this past Monday. I also know in the past when he or other birders have been doing hawk watches in Fairwood specifically, they have had individual days where they've had thousands of individual hawks. On those types of days, it is usually mostly broadwing hawks that we have thousands of, but it's still really, really cool to get to see those thousands of hawks flying over the forest in one day.
Yeah, and I'll just add something real quick to that too, is that it's one of the really, and I'm glad that Eric said that, because I meant to say this in my thing. One of the really cool things about hawk watching is, and I'm again mentioned this in the video, is that you really don't have to be at a place like Cape May. You may not get the overwhelming spectacle that they see at Cape May, but while we were standing at Fairwood, while I've birded there, been hawk watching there, I've had a lot of the same phenomenon that Will and just now that Eric were mentioning. We've had nice big flights of buteos, those broader winged hawks like red tails, broad winged hawk, red shoulders. We had butterflies going over. The day that we filmed that, I had a lot of monarch butterflies go over. I had a couple other species. I've noted wandering gliders, dragonflies going over there. So just it really shows how you can find these really great bits of habitat and cool experiences even away from these famous migration monitoring sites. Now you can go ahead again. That just reminded me that I meant to say.
Great. But yeah, and I also just wanted to make sure that you all know, now that we've kind of introduced you to how amazing hawk watching can be, how amazing a place like Fairwood Forest can be, even if you aren't a hawk watching expert. We do want to make sure that you know that we are inviting you out to the forest, where we have set up a little scavenger hunt where throughout the forest there are information sheets on all of the native hawks and a few other raptors that you can find here around Maryland. That scavenger hunt can be found either in the forest or on the Hamilton Community Association website. So this event isn't just about talking about hawks, it's also an open opportunity to invite you out to the forest to come and enjoy it and make your own memories and have your own experiences out there. So with that, I would like to open up the floor to any questions or comments or anything that folks would like to know a little bit more about. All right, great. Well, I guess that means that we could probably end our session for today. I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow at 6 p.m. we have our final virtual Hawk Celebration event. At that event, we will be having Rodney Stotts, who, if you are not familiar with him, is an all-star a falconer. He'll be showing off some of his live falcons. And if you want to learn a little bit more about him, we have some links on our website and on our social media. And he has actually had a documentary shot about him, about how falconry has changed his life and has really guided who he is as a person. And he will be presenting tomorrow at 6 p.m. for our final Hawk Celebration event, and we would love to see you all there. So thank you all so much, and if you have any questions, please let us know before we take off. All right, great. Well, thanks everybody for coming out, and we hope to see you all tomorrow. Have a good one, everybody.